Hello and welcome back to the Will I Vike It podcast. My name is Craig, and today my guest is Theresa Emerich Kamper. Welcome to the show, Theresa.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
It occurred to me partway through saying that I didn't double check the pronunciation of your name, so hopefully that was good.
It's close enough. No one can pronounce it anyway. Yeah, Theresa Emerich Kamper. You were pretty darn close.
Okay. So do you want to maybe start by just sort of giving a brief overview of what it is that you do?
Sure. So my work is slightly multifaceted. I basically have three prongs to what I do. The first thing is I teach how to practical courses in animal butchery and tanning, clothing manufacture, all of which are based around sort of pre-metal technology for the most part, as in the technologies that I teach, not necessarily the tools that I use. The second prong would be demonstrations for open air museums. And then the third is actual research for traditional glass case museums. And I analyze prehistoric leather artifacts.
That was very succinct. You've got that down to a T, I think.
I've said that a few times.
So, I mean, initially, what was it that drew you to the historical skills to begin with? Was it actually the skills themselves, or was it an interest in history?
Oh, it was absolutely the skills themselves. The interest in the archaeological context angle came quite a bit later. Originally, it was more just wanting to run off into the wilderness and live off the land, just like every 7-year-old wants to do, right? Then it quickly became apparent that, especially, and this was the pre-internet age. I am old enough that, that was the pre-internet age.
Sure.
You really couldn't just look it up. So you were either trying it out, and it was trial and error, it's a way to learn. I'm not going to say it's the most efficient way to learn, because it's most decidedly not. But one of the resources for skills was archaeological texts or ethnographic expositions on groups that had been, for lack of a better word, studied during certain parts of history. And it was some of the kinds of things that you could still find in a library, and actually open a book and read about it, and then attempt to figure out what in God's green earth the ethnologist was actually talking about. Because there is quite a lot of things that people saw and wrote down, and now in hindsight, it's very obvious they had no idea what they were watching or looking at, and therefore the recording of that particular skill is lacking quite a lot of detail, and sometimes is completely erroneous altogether.
So is that because they haven't practiced the skill themselves, so they don't know what they're doing, and they're just writing down what they see? Or
pretty much. I mean, it's just a lot of times it was very observational, and which was great, but if you hadn't done that skill enough to actually be able to appreciate the nuance of what some of the people were doing, then it's very unlikely that you would have actually recorded it. And then there was definitely a bias for some skills over other skills. There was a big interest in hunting, of course, and anything that revolved around that. And sometimes the camp craft or the camp life, those kind of everyday things that really make up the majority of what you do in a day, sort of went unnoted or got a passing mention, but no real detail added.
And you find that with archaeology too, don't you? Because there's a lot of textiles and stuff got discarded early on because people were focusing on looking for swords and things. And they just go, oh, it's just a bit of fabric. We don't need that.
Yes. I think especially within the modern age, textiles specifically actually is a really good example. Because we don't think of textiles as something special because you get a t-shirt and you throw it away. But textiles, when they first began to be manufactured, would have been an intensive amount of labor. The growing, processing, the spinning, the weaving, and the actual sewing of a garment would have made that garment take, 2, 3, 4 times as long as a similar garment made out of leather. So, originally that textile would have been something to have been treasured. So some of that is just modern bias on what we consider important. Some of it is preservational bias when we start looking back further and further, in the sense that we start losing, we don't get them, we don't have the preservation of a lot of that organic material. We mostly get stone, bone, and if we're really lucky, wood.
Yeah, yeah. So you obviously your main focus is on the leather work, right?
It
Itself.
is. That is my specialism is into
Yeah.
prehistoric
So
skin processing technologies. Yes.
was there a particular thing that drew you to that? Did you just have an interest in it to begin with?
Honestly, it's not very deep. I grew up next to the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming in the United States. And
Yeah.
I had quite a few friends who were Native American and they powwowed. And the clothing, especially for the traditional dancing, the absolutely gorgeous leather dresses, really were something that I coveted. I really, really wanted a pretty leather dress. And at the time I had no idea where to buy leather. So I thought, well, people used to make it, so I'll just do that. Yeah. About
Oh,
2.5, 3 years after I started trying to just do that, I eventually came up with what I now know to be dry scrape brain tanning. It wasn't brilliant. My mother still has my first dress, and I did indeed make that dress that is made out of the first 3 skins that I tanned. But they were fit to purpose. They were appropriate softness for clothing, not the best clothing in the world, but clothing. Yeah. And then ever since it just kind of, that was just the thing that drew me, it's where I would always come back from other skills I would learn. I'd be like, ooh, I wonder if I could tie that into hide tanning. Right. So, flint napping and bone work and woodwork, it all kind of tied back into, all right, how does that apply to tanning?
it's a funny thing. There's so many skills like that I've learned later in life that I'd wished I'd picked up sort of in childhood and that kind of thing. So you have
Mm-hmm.
that extra experience. I think I've come to it quite late compared to, I mean, how old did you say you were
I started
when
trying
you
to tan when I was 11.
11?
And I was
Wow.
successful after we'd moved to Cody, Wyoming. I think I was about 13. So 13,
Yeah,
between 13 and 14, I think it was that summer.
that's pretty impressive. I don't think there'd be that many 13-year-olds around today that can tan a hide.
Yeah, I've had a couple in my courses. I
Yeah.
normally my normal age cutoff is 14 or so with parents. Every once in a while I get a request for a younger student to come and I feel like a hypocrite if I say no. So, and some of them have been challenging and others have been absolutely brilliant. So, it just goes to show you sometimes it's the child, not the age.
Yeah, it's having the focus as well, isn't it? Like if
Yeah.
they're interested. So my daughter is 7,
Mm-hmm.
and I ran a course in Cumbria at Easter
Mm-hmm.
with a guy called Hamish. He's Pictavia Leather.
Yes, yes, I've met
Yeah.
Hamish. Yeah.
So we run a course every Easter where I teach butchery and cooking, and he
Mm-hmm.
teaches the tanning side of things. Um,
Nice.
and his partner brought some tiny little moleskins that she'd acquired. And so my daughter was there for a good couple of hours with a little teaspoon scraping away at the and
Molds are
eventually,
great for kids. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, eventually she managed to make a little pouch out of one of them and
Excellent.
tanned with tea. We try to keep it quite simple.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
moles actually fat tan really easily with children. Yeah, a little bit of like half of an egg yolk and really beat well with some water. They fat tan up really easily as well.
I wasn't 100% sure what to do with it because I've done a bit with bark tanning and then we've done a bit with tea tanning, like fish skins and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I just like, well, I'm doing some fish skins anyway. We'll just put it in and see what happens.
Perfect.
It did
Absolutely.
the job. Yeah.
Yep, it will. Yeah, they're really thin skins. Yeah, so they're not, and they have a fairly loose fiber structure, so they are amenable to a number of different kinds of tannage technologies without being too much trouble.
And they're very soft.
Oh
That was
yes,
the main takeaway.
I mean moleskin trousers. Moleskin used to be moleskins, that fabric that
You
everybody
need a
talks
lot.
about. You need a lot. Yeah, I bet
Yeah.
an average pair of trousers probably would have taken 200 to 300.
Wow.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder if it's worth it at that point.
Well, I mean, there's a reason that it was
Yeah.
a status item rather than something you work
Yeah.
in the fields in, I suppose.
Yeah. So you also have a PhD, right? I'm not going to attempt to say what it's in. I'll let you do that.
Absolutely. Yes. I have a PhD in the analysis of prehistoric leather artifacts, looking at the difference in tannage technologies.
So my question about that is, and you've already said you're more of a sort of practical person, you get your hands in, you get on with it. So what led you to take an academic route?
Well, I came over to the UK for a master's degree in experimental archaeology at the
Yeah.
University of Exeter. At the time, they were the only one in the world that offered that master's program. And one of the curators for the Paleo-Indian department at the Smithsonian, where I was working at the time in Washington, D.C., introduced me to the program. I'd heard about it before, but he was the one who just kind of gave me more information on it and said, this program is basically custom made for you. You need to go do this. So I did. And whilst I was here, of course, one of my major interests is in tanning. A lot of the academic articles I was reading on tanning had a lot of portions of them that made it quite obvious that the people writing them didn't have a terribly good handle on how tanning actually works. So they weren't maliciously trying to come up with information that was incorrect or didn't represent reality. It's simply that they didn't understand the technology well enough to be doing the experiments that they were doing. Right. Therefore, they were starting with information that wasn't realistic. And it's really hard to build a good experiment based on that and come out with any kind of result that would actually represent anything in history or prehistory. So
yeah,
kind of got a bit of a bug there where, I jump around the room and shake my fist and be like, no, this just doesn't work. If this part and this part and this, they don't go together. And then this conclusion can't be correct because it's based on this thing. And yes, so went on a little rant, wrote up a PhD proposal. It was then put forward to Professor Linda Hercombe, who during my MA was away having a hip replacement. So I had never met her. So she got this quite ridiculous pie in the sky kind of hope of a PhD proposal that she didn't say no to right off the bat. She said, I would like to meet with this person. Let's have a chat first. So we did. And she later told me, she's like, the reason we need to have that chat is because what you wanted to do with this PhD meant that you had to have an incredibly good handle on the practical application the skill level before you could even go after this. And she just needed to be convinced that I did. So hence the PhD happened.
Very nice. Yeah. It's not a route. I don't know whether I've heard of anyone else sort of taking that route where they go from the practical and then into the academic.
There's a few here and there. You'd be surprised. Yeah. But they're few and far between, but they do exist. Absolutely. And they make for very interesting PhDs oftentimes.
So, shall we talk a bit about what we know about the history of tanning then? So,
sure.
I guess, so for instance, what sort of tanning would have been used traditionally?
Well, in order for me to answer that question, I would then have to define the concept of tradition. Okay. Right? Okay, so you can ask what type of tanning was used in a certain area during a certain time period, and that might be traditional for that group at that time period. But if they then move out and a new group moves in, then their tradition might change. So what I can say is that the potential and most likely progression of tannage technologies was likely mechanically processed skin, where things are simply defleshed because it's very obvious. I mean, people have been preserving food for probably millions of years at this point. If you don't deflesh the hide, it rots. Right. Then you dry it. Now you have a hair-on raw hide. If you stomp on and move around that skin to some degree, it will gain some level of flexibility depending on the species. Some species will actually become reasonably workable just with that kind of thing. Others nah, you're still going to just beat a burglar with it. It's just ridiculously hard. It's like armor. But
Yeah.
Then smoking was probably an unintentional consequence of potentially being in shelters. If that skin got enough smoke whilst it was damp, whilst it was drying, it will have changed its properties. If it was completely dry and it got smoked, it's unlikely it would have had a huge amount of effect. Smoking a completely dry skin doesn't allow the smoke, and the acrolein and the aldehydes to do any kind of penetration of the inner dermal fibers. But if somebody noted that that smoke had changed the properties of the skin, then perhaps they would have tried that again. How do we then make the jump to adding fats to the skin? Well, there's two options here. This is obviously my opinion. This is something we'll never actually likely be able to prove, because it's very difficult to disprove. As science says, it's all about disproving, not about proving. Either species that had enough endogenous fat within the skin structure that were then smoked were realized to be much easier to soften. So you have a lubrication agent within the fibers of the skin. Or something that was a bed skin that had been mechanically softened and somebody spilled their soup on it, which was full of fat. And maybe it was brain soup. Maybe this is where brain tanning came from. Or, just as likely, some annoying 2-year-old grabbed the brain and just rubbed it on mom's bed skins. We always discount children in archaeology quite often, but children do all kinds of wacky things. And really, all it would need to have someone understand that this changed the structure and the skin and the behavioral characteristics was just the ability to recognize cause and effect. Even if those oils have gone into that spot and those bed skins are used for a given period of time, that part that has had the water, which is your transportation aid, plus those fats, especially if they were emulsified fats like brain, like liver, milk, some types of marine mammal oils, egg yolks, and milk, or I said milk already, sorry. That part of the skin would end up softer than the rest of it. So somebody being able to recognize cause and effect, note that, and then have enough curiosity to try it again. Remember what happened and try it again. And this brings us to fat tanning, which is the ubiquitous type of tannage technology around the world. Now, we can argue all day long about whether it is a tan or not, in the sense of how chemically permanent it is. I will argue for, others will argue against, and that's fine. It'll be an ongoing discussion until I get my hands on a really good lab. So, and then that's been around. We have extant evidence for the use of skins which have been oiled and softened in some nature, so fat tanned, whether that be brain tanned, egg tanned, sour milk, any of the different fats and oils that will either lubricate the skin or actually create an aldehydic tannage. That's different between those two. But we have extant evidence for this going back about 10,000 years. We have circumstantial evidence for for processing skin, so making processed skin. We don't know what they're doing. It's just skin processing based on use wear on stone tools. Those come from Grandolina and Atapuerca in Spain, and they go back 780,000 years ago, which is Homo heidelbergensis. It's not even modern humans. So we've been playing with skins for a long time. So saith the evidence.
It's really interesting, though, to think, like you're saying, about how maybe they would have accidentally come across some of these things initially, because we don't know how. But I find it interesting that different cultures independently would have come out with very similar methods.
It's pretty likely that humans moved across the globe already understanding tannage technologies.
Okay. So they took it with them.
They took it with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't, other than vegetable tanning, which may be independent or parallel evolution of the skill or independent invention, as it doesn't come around until quite late in time. The earliest very solid evidence for vegetable tanning that I have personally seen in Northern Europe is from the White Horse Hill find And I believe that's it's early Bronze Age, and I want to say it's 3,000-ish years ago. I can't remember the exact dates. I'm an archaeologist, but I'm
Yeah.
really terrible with dates. So
That's fine. I'm sure that's close enough.
yeah, but that's an eye blink as far as human history. So vegetable tanning is actually very, very new. We have
Yeah.
some evidence from some of the glacial or ice patch finds down in the Alps and some parts of the very dry areas of the Middle East, where we're looking at pushing those dates back to maybe 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. But
Yeah.
still, it's it's recent. You know, peat bogs are super recent. They don't come about until basically the middle of the Mesolithic in the north. We don't even have them in the south. A lot of people were nomadic prior to settling into areas. Vegetable tan weighs a third to a half as much more than fat tans do. So there's actually a legitimate reason why you wouldn't choose to vegetable tan, even if you do know that it exists.
Yeah.
And it's easier done if you have large containers. You can absolutely do some version of vegetable tanning with no containers. It's not what we would call a modern full vegetable tan, but it can be done.
I'm just thinking how that might work. Dig a hole?
Yes, you can do that. You can also do rub on. So they do successive in the
Okay.
Arctic. There's lots of groups who do successive layers of rubbing on of very strong tannin solutions, but they're mostly doing it with things like reindeer that have very thin skins. A lot of Arctic animals have very thin skins. Not seal, not walrus, not none of your pinnipeds, none of your semi-aquatic water mammals. They all have very thick skins, but a lot of your terrestrial mammals in those areas have very thin skins, which do lend themselves to that kind of use of that tannage technology.
Yeah, actually, because we did the bark tanning at Easter, we were doing that as a rub-on method.
Yes.
You put a layer on, dry it off, put another one on, because it's a quicker method for people to do over a couple of days. So
Yeah,
they've got a finished
absolutely.
product to take home. So yeah, I'm quite aware of that one.
Yes. So for like a couple of
Yeah.
days, depending on what type of skin you're using, you're basically doing a combination tan. You will have vegetable tan the outer layers, but got not a lot of tannin affixing to the dermal fibers on the interior portion of the skin. And then you dress it with whatever dressing solution, your oil solution, whatever it is that you decide to soften with. And that is what's actually softening the internal parts of the skin. So you have what's called a combination tan.
It's quite amazing your kind of scientific knowledge behind it as well. So at what point, because I'm going to assume traditionally people didn't know why it was happening, shall we say?
No.
It just worked. So at what point do we start to get people looking at it as you've ended up doing for your PhD from a scientific perspective, or were you the first?
I wouldn't say I'm the first. Now,
Yeah.
you have people looking at the chemistry of tanning
Yeah.
very early on. Honestly, I mean, you probably have people are really looking at cause and effect and what happens, why, and potentially being able to do taste tests for pH and things like that way back in the meat.
Yeah.
You get chromium tan comes out in I believe it's 1870. It's quite a lot earlier than most people think. So during the Industrial Revolution, of course, you've got people looking at the chemistry of these things. Leather was an incredibly important resource. And at that time, there was a lot of money being thrown toward understanding the chemistry of leather and how leather is produced and what leather actually is, and does this count as leather, and what about this thing over here if we add this in, and yeah.
Yeah.
And there's entire books written on just that. Some more readable than others.
Yeah.
But prehistorically, there will have been a fair bit of people deciding, they do it that way because that's how the person before them taught them to. But that's
Yeah.
not to say that people didn't experiment, that they didn't say, I wonder what happens if. Curiosity is a human trait. And I would say it's a hominid trait. I mean, heck, it's even an animal trait. How many times do you see, your dog go just flip something over just to see what's underneath?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's another rock.
Yeah.
And then they're like, ooh, it's another rock. Woo. That's curiosity. So
Yeah.
that's a trait that would certainly lend itself to people experimenting, trying out different things, and probably coming up with their own version of the method that they learned. And then they passed that one on. And that's where you start seeing traditions of tanning. And you can even see it in the modern groups of what I call the craft communities of tanning. There are traditional schools of tanning where when you look at the tools they use, the methods they use, you have a pretty good idea of where they probably learned, at least to area and sometimes even to person. So it's still evident today, let alone in prehistory. And I think that it probably would have been magnified in prehistory simply because there wasn't quite as much admixture between people via the ease of communication that we now have available to us.
Yeah. So what's been the most surprising or interesting discovery you've made whilst you've been researching leather tanning?
Oh, gosh. It's hard. There's a lot of different really interesting things. Possibly one of them was seeing twisted sinew thread in the southwestern US in an artifact. The only other place I've seen twisted sinew thread is in the Arctic. It doesn't seem like most groups bother doing reverse wrap 2-ply thread, just because you really don't have to. It's a lot of effort for not a lot of gain, except in the Arctic, where, if a seam fails, then you die, which is how a lot of things in the Arctic end up. If your clothes malfunction, you die. So you want to make really sure that that doesn't happen. So once you get past a certain latitude, the care with which people sew and pattern and work with materials just has this exponential curve. Some of the other really interesting things was, probably running into some of the ice patch stuff from out of the Alps when I was doing the actual PhD research, and finding that a number of those pieces, I wouldn't call them vegetable tan, not by any stretch of the imagination, but some of the tests showed that they had most likely come in contact with tannins at some point in time. That could be environmental, but that's pretty unlikely. You don't get high concentrations of tannin in the environment naturally in very many places. Leaves do not puddle in the forest, in a pool, and you suddenly have a vat with enough tannin in it to tan. That just doesn't, it's not a thing. Peat bogs, some of them possibly, some of them obviously can tan, but quite a large number of them can't. The sphagnum content or the pH is wrong or this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of variables there. So that was really interesting. But I have interpreted that as potentially people using tannin-based dyes on fat tan skins. So coloring what would otherwise be the, standard brain tan color, which is sort of whatever color of the smoke you got, however darkly you smoked it or lightly you smoked it. And that a dye that has a lot of tannin in it will change the behavioral characteristics enough that you can tell that it's come in contact with tannin.
So is that the first evidence we have of anyone deliberately coloring leatherwork?
Well, all I can see is come in contact with tannins. That's all I can say. And I would say that there's quite a bit of stuff in Egypt that predates that significantly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other methods would people use to color leather?
So there's mineral dyes, there's plant-based dyes, there's insect-based dyes. And I think those are probably the three big groups.
Okay.
Oh, well, I guess I should say animal-based dyes, really, because then there's whelks that make royal purple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one off the coast of Wales. It's protected. I'm grasping for the name of the actual color. Murex. There you are.
That's stunning. I've not heard that one before.
Yeah, and cochineal, which is a word that most people have run into if they look at the back of their food. It's used as a dye for food these days, but it was also it gives a very, very bright range of reds, pinks, and purples if you sadden it. It comes from a scale insect that grows on the prickly pear cactus in the southwestern United States and Mesoamerica. And then also, apparently, I learned recently there's a cousin of it. It's also a scale insect. It's called Polish cochineal that grows on the root of a specific plant. But you have to pull the plant up to get out the insect, whereas the prickly pear cactus, you can just scrape them off, which is why there's prickly pear all over the Mediterranean. That's from the New World. It was brought here by the Spaniards, not because they liked a cactus, because they wanted to grow cochineal.
Wow. That is fascinating. It comes down to, again, like that, how people like discover these things. I just find that amazing.
Absolutely.
Like you say, it must come down to that curiosity and just experimentation.
Absolutely. I mean, it only takes, squishing a couple of those cochineal insects in your fingers because you were picking nopal, you were picking, say cactus fruits, and you got some on your fingers and like, that's not the color of that fruit. What in the world is that? Let's squish some more insects. Oh, cool. What happens if I rub it on myself? Oh, that's pretty. What happens if I rub it on this bag? Oh, that's cool too. Ta-da. Now we know a new dye. Obviously, there'll be a bit more nuance down the road as far as people perfecting the technique, but
it's got to start somewhere. Like you said,
absolutely.
with the fat tanning and stuff, someone's got to get the idea to begin with for it to be fine-tuned, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So are you interested in any particular periods or cultures? Because a lot of people tend to focus, so I tend to focus more on Anglo-Saxon and a bit of Viking. Is there a bit that draws you in?
No, I don't have that at all. I am a technologist rather than a group specific sort of interest as how I look at the world. I am really interested in skin processing and animal processing, how people use and utilize animals and animal parts. Not so much when you start getting into secondary animal products. Once you hit wool and milk and those kinds of things, my interest wanes a little bit. I mean, I'm happy to eat cheese. In fact, I quite like cheese. It might be one of my main food groups, but I'm perfectly happy to buy it from people who know how to make it.
So I have a couple more questions on leather before, if you don't mind, I was going to move into talking a bit about some of the other stuff you've done as well.
Of course,
got the
sure.
time. Yeah. But I did have a couple of sort of quick things, maybe quick, depends how long you want to answer for.
What are you saying? I'm long-winded. Apologies.
I wondered whether there was any kind of myths that circulate around leatherworking that you like to debunk.
Oh yeah.
Is it, or is this a separate podcast? This is going to be.
Nope. One and only one that I'll bother tossing out there is that whole bizarre concept of people chewing hides.
Okay. Yeah.
That's utter rubbish. Really and truly. I mean, the whole concept of it probably harkens back to, again, a couple of ethnographic recordings of people, again, in this case, Arctic and subarctic communities, crimping mukluk soles with their teeth using the little tiny pleats at the front. Some groups have a tool, some groups did it with their teeth, some groups have both. The other was chewing parts of soles soft after they've gotten wet and then they've been let dry too long and they harden, and interpreting that as how you soften a skin. When you look at how many skins are needed by, say, a family of 5 in, we'll just go with the subarctic region. When you look at 2 pairs of clothing, when all of their utilitarian, all of their bedding, and potentially even housing, it comes out between 40 and 65 skins a year. Yep. That need to be tanned.
A lot of chewing.
In order for a family to continue to have the things they needed. That's absolutely not doable. No one would have teeth by the time they're 20, and people did not die when they were 20. Another fallacy about sort of the pre-metal era is people
Yeah.
did not die when they were 30. They had a fairly varied lifespan. Some people died young, some people died middle aged, some people made it a darn long time. Well, so
Yeah.
that would be the thing that I would love to just ditch. It's probably the question I get asked the most when I do demonstrations by the general public. It is one of those ridiculous sayings or ideas that has embedded itself in modern culture. Everyone has heard the concept of chewing a hide soft, and it simply doesn't exist. The whole point of, while you're softening a skin, is to actually have the fibers drying whilst you're moving them.
Yeah.
So chewing them is doing the exact opposite of that thing. You can make some kind of weird flexible rawhide product that's already dried, and then you use your teeth to put little lines in multiple directions on it. But again,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to wear it for clothing. It's nowhere near soft. It has no dead air space. It wouldn't be warm. It would be windproof, but you'd be walking around looking like the Tin Man. Yeah, it's not functional.
I think the one for me would be that most people seem to think is that it's a smelly job due to people using urine and dog feces, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And so people go, oh, I don't know if you should be tanning in our camp because it's going to smell bad. No.
If it smells bad, you're doing it wrong.
I did have one recently, and I must admit I was busy and I left it in a tub of I was stripping the hair, so I left it in a tub of ash. And when I pulled it out, it was quite right, shall we say?
I mean, I shouldn't say you're doing it wrong. If it smells, you've allowed some part of the process to get out of hand, right? You've allowed bacterial growth to happen. The whole urine and dog feces thing is a very much a medieval, post-medieval, industrial revolution kind of concept.
It was just we'd finished the course, and I don't want to throw the hides away. I'll chuck them in a bucket with some ash.
Yes.
And come back to them. And then
I'll get back to them, right.
And then other things happen, and then you suddenly think it's been 3, maybe 4 weeks now. Like,
yeah.
Interestingly, the bees were drinking the water.
That means your pH got real low.
Oh, okay. There you go. I've learned
once
something.
Once it drops down before about below about 11.5, you lose the ability to control bacterial growth.
Okay. I think it might have got rained on and stuff, so I think it had diluted maybe from the...
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. There you go. I've learned something new. Every day's a school day.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, I've got some stinky ones out to the side of my house as well that came from the bushcraft show that I was really hoping someone would just take home with them, and then nobody did. And I have 3 days before I leave the country on my next teaching tour. And I don't have any idea how I'm going to find the time to deal with these, and they cannot sit in the lye bath any longer. They're the housemates are going, can those potentially be moved or dealt with or bin? Any of the above, we don't care.
As long as they're gone.
Yeah.
Oh no. So as well as doing the leather work, when you're teaching your courses on using the whole animal,
yes.
I don't know whether, do you teach people to cook the cuts of meat as well?
I teach people to process the cuts of meat, and then I have someone else who cooks.
Okay.
I joke that my specialty is the kill it, not the cook it. I can literally blow up boiled eggs and burn water. So I recognize my strengths and weaknesses, and I have an assistant. When I'm in the UK, it's Caroline Ross, who is Found and Ground on Instagram. She comes along and she's an absolutely fabulous venison cook.
Okay.
And
I was going to ask. Sorry, go on.
The students do definitely see how I prepare things. I send it off. I talk them through what she's going to do, and then off it goes, and then it reappears one day or 4 hours or 2 hours later, and to everyone's delight.
My question was going to be connected to that, is whether you had a favorite cut of venison.
Oh, gosh. I think it's going to be everybody's favorite cut, right? It's obviously backstrap. So filet in
It
this
should
country.
be.
Yeah.
It should
Yeah.
be.
It's delicious. It's just so
Yeah.
good. I actually prefer it over tenderloin because quite often I find that the tenderloin picks up a little bit of flavor from the innards now and again, depending on how
Yeah.
freshly I got the animal and what happened in the meantime.
I've been pushing this for a while now for more people to try venison because I think some people are put off, but I think that the backstrap, as you call it, or the
Yeah.
loin, I think that that is better than a steak.
Any day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's way more tender. And if you
Yeah.
treat it right, if you don't like the gamey flavor, soak it in water overnight and then cook it. Get all the blood out of it. And it will bring that gamey flavor down. I mean, a lot of people really prize that deer flavor. They like the deer flavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have a problem with gamey, then go with red deer over, say, muntjac. But muntjac's really good.
I've not
And
tried muntjac.
yeah, actually, it's an absolute bear to skin. I
Is
mean,
it?
they hold on to their skin. They have no interest in having their skin come off whatsoever. And it's also tiny skin and it's really thick, as is
Yeah.
often the case for animals that come from warm places. And it's originally from India, Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's got a very thick skin, quite hard to fat tan. Makes a pretty decent veg tan if you want to make shoes, though.
Oh.
Yep. And
My
it's delicious.
I must try some because it's one I haven't tried because I tend to, because of the period I'm doing, we tend to stick to generally roe deer.
Yeah.
If I can't get roe, I go for fallow, which is not quite right for our period, but
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes that's the only option we've got.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the answer to invasive species is eat them.
Yeah. So my sister-in-law's family are vegan,
Excellent.
and my nephew is coming up for 14 and he's decided he wants to eat meat.
Okay.
So his mum quite rightly has said he can eat meat if he processes it himself.
Hey, cool. Very good. I like that.
So the question then came up, could I show him how to butcher a deer? So,
Mm-hmm.
fine, but you haven't eaten meat for a long time, not properly.
Yes. Yes.
Rather than buy you a whole deer and it go in the freezer and sit there until it goes in the bin, come
Mm-hmm.
over, I'll cook you the loin, you can have a taste.
Yep.
And if you like it, we'll get a whole deer and we'll run through it after that.
Yeah.
He took one bite of it, didn't like it.
Yep. He's also gonna. The other problem is if he's been vegan or even vegetarian for a really long time, his gut biome isn't going to be set up to digest meat in the easiest way either. It's going to take him a little while to be able
He's
to even
he's occasionally eaten meat, like if he's at our house, so he has had
Okay, so
meat.
he's had some. Oh, that's
But
cool.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, he's not been completely without. They're not that
Yeah.
strict. He can kind of make, the kids are allowed to make their own decision.
Yep.
They just don't do it at home. But
Right.
if he wants to do it at home, then he needs to process the animal, which
Right.
is fair enough.
Yeah.
And it's more ethical to do it
Yes.
from
No,
a
I
point of
agree.
view. Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
then you become a getitarian,
Yes.
which is a term I ran into in Australia and I actually quite like.
Yeah.
People who they will eat meat if they get it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, my sister-in-law actually ate some of it and did like it. So
okay.
it almost backfired on her, I think. Some didn't like it. She did.
Yeah, well, there's the UK is one of those places where we've killed off all the large predators, and there is
Yeah.
actually a surplus of deer. And there is a point at which those populations get high enough that they do damage to the environment, to the woodlands,
Yeah.
and we are the large predator here, and we have the means with which to dispatch the excess population of these animals humanely, and then bring them into the food chain in such a way that they help allay, food poverty. There should be more use of wild game being given to families of low means.
Yeah, a lot of game gets discarded, shot, chucked into the hedge. It's Shocking.
Yeah, that's not hunting.
Mm. I've come across people before that have shot for the sport rather than the meat.
Yeah. And you know
And
what?
so
If
they
you
don't know
want
what
to
to do with
shoot
it.
for the sport, that's great, but the meat needs to go to someone.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
chucking it in a hedge that's atrocious. It's not waste. It's a
Mm.
very egocentric thing to think that if we chuck something in the bush that it's wasted. It's wasted for us. We
Yeah.
didn't use it. But in nature, nothing goes to waste. There's going to be
Yeah,
some
there is
very
that.
happy foxes, badgers, and
Yeah.
shrews, lots
Yeah.
of insects, etc., etc. The concept of killing something to then discard it, in my opinion, is unethical. Yes.
Mm. So, shall we move on? Because I did say about 20 minutes ago I'd move on to another topic. And here we are.
It's all right. It's all right. I mean, I'm known for tanning. I'm known for the
uh,
animal stuff. It's where it
ah,
always goes. It's fine.
I just kind of, where we've sort of planned this for a while, every now and again a question would pop into my head and I'm like, thinking about that. So the list is quite long. But I was gonna get you maybe at least briefly, because I think people might be interested to hear about the trip you took last year with Sarah Day.
All right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think was when I first came across you, because knowing Sally Ann, and I know she followed your adventure.
Yes.
And I think that's when I first came across your Instagram and stuff. So yeah, do you want to maybe tell people what it was you did?
Yeah, sure. I can fill you in on that. No problem. So
Yeah.
Sarah Day, who is Mema the Cave Woman on Instagram, definitely give her a look. See, she's a fantastic lady and does amazingly interesting stuff.
Yeah.
She and I concocted a crazy plan to make two rawhide canoes. So basically, think big basket shaped canoes or basket shaped like canoes with rawhide skins sewn over the top. Um, and then the goal was to float from the highest navigable point of the Thames right on through to the Greenwich Mean Line, which would have then been the beginning and ending of time, right? Which is quite
Yeah.
poetic.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do it in completely Stone Age, which Stone Age gear, minus a dry bag for all of the electronic kind of stuff that we wanted to have along in order to actually document the trip.
Sure. Yeah.
And then for the first 3 days, we also kept all of our bedding in a dry bag just to make sure that the boats were working properly. Or we sank all of our worldly possessions to the bottom of the Thames. So we set off up near Cricklade, above Cricklade, actually. And
Yeah.
we proceeded to paddle 217 or 219 kilometers of the Thames over, now I can't remember if it was 11 days. I think it was 11 days, 10 or 11 days. And it was quite the adventure. It was super fun. Some very long days. We ran into an interesting weather set where the wind blew dead from the east for the entirety of the time we were paddling, which is the exact opposite of the way that the wind normally blows in the UK. We had a headwind
Wow.
the entire way. There was exactly two big bends in the river that actually took us backward, where we were able to deploy our sail. And that was quite fun. But we had high hopes of being able to sail some of the long straight sections. Yeah, including the Henley Reach, which we happened to paddle through, I believe, the day before their regatta got underway.
Oh, wow.
We were trying to get there before the regatta happened, as that would have just been mayhem had we rocked up in the middle of that. But
and so was the purpose of the trip, that was just for your own amusement, for fun?
We wanted to look at the potential for how much weight and how difficult it would be to move goods up and down the Thames in boats like that. We also were really wanting to look at the performance of the boats themselves. How far could you get in a day? What sorts of obstacles did you run into with them? What sort of maintenance needs did they require on a long trip? Because I've made and used these boats on a number of occasions before. This was, I think, my 5th boat that I'd made. However, I'd never used one for a long period of time in an actual sort of intentional voyage setup, right? Where you had a beginning, a middle, and an end sort of concept. So we really wanted to look at the maintenance. And yeah, we got to do all of those things. We hauled a heck of a lot of gear. I mean, I would say we didn't use at least 40% of what we had with us. We just kind of had it along just to see what the boats could take.
Okay. Yeah.
And the answer was a lot. We could have added quite a bit more weight. They were never even close to being laden enough that we felt like they were sitting too low in the water. Like our freeboard was perfect the whole way. Above perfect, actually. Probably if it had been a bit lower, we would have caught less wind. Yeah.
And so
maintenance. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to ask about the size of the canoes themselves. So are they what we'd think of as a standard, like a Canadian canoe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I believe Sarah's was 15 feet long or 16 feet long. And mine was about 13 feet or 12 feet. So I based mine on the smaller single canoes that I'd paddled previously. Unfortunately, with mine, when you make them as a basket, oftentimes the ribs spread a little bit. Mine got a little too wide in the middle, so I missed that golden ratio between length and width, which would have made it a very, very, very fun boat on rapids and to go play and paddle in the rapids, because it would turn on a dime, but it didn't track particularly well. So what we ended up doing on the third day, especially with the wind and that boat being so light, that I had so much freeboard that the wind would I was working so hard to keep her on the line and deal with the wind, that we ended up putting a bunch of the equipment in that boat and using it as a towboat. And the both of us paddling the longer boat, which tracked much better because of the length to width ratio. And also having two paddlers is quite social and really fun. You can actually talk to each other and sing songs and comment on all the silly things you saw along the shore.
I guess it depends on who you're paddling with, because I've been in a boat with some people that aren't very good at paddling. So
yes. Well, Sarah is very good at paddling. She's actually, I believe she has a number of qualifications in that and has worked for Ray Goodwin as well, who's a fairly well-known canoe instructor in the UK.
Yeah.
Well, whereas I'm just a self-taught nut job that's from Wyoming and had a canoe and was like, well, that looks like a fun river. We'll get on that and see if I don't die. Yeah.
Do you plan to do it again at any point? Is it like tweak the plan and have another go?
Absolutely. We completely plan on building another boat, and we've been tossing around the idea of doing the Dordogne River in France next June in 2025. Yeah.
Wow.
Which would involve us building a boat this winter, which is starting to feel very close.
So did the other boats not survive?
Have a chit chat about that sooner rather than later, I think.
Did the other boats not survive?
My boat actually had been reskinned from the skins that I had used to skin the boat for the Surviving the Stone Age program for Channel 4 in 2019. So yes, when we finally made it to the Australia Sea Scouts in London, I had my boat out to dry and one of the side seams split. So it could be resewed, absolutely, and I could use the skins again, but I think we're just going to do new skins so that we can have a longer boat. Yeah.
So would these things be, I suppose, fairly disposable then, if they've got a sort of limited life to them?
Disposable, I would say you would get, if you were careful with them and you make sure you keep drying them and dressing the skins only on the outside, not the inside. If you dress both sides with oil, then the interior of the skin cannot dry and it will rot from the inside of the skin out. So yes, you really, really only want to dress the outside.
So with maintenance, they can survive.
Oh yes, agreed. I think in a reasonable climate, which I don't consider the UK to have a reasonable climate, they could probably survive for 2 years or so before you really needed to start thinking about maybe doing patching on the skins and that kind of thing, possibly even 3 years in some dry places. It's the frames that actually take a beating. And that's simply because the rawhide can exert 40 pounds per square inch of pressure.
Yeah.
It's why coracles are round. It's because they deal with that strain better. And once you get into skin on boats of different shapes, you don't actually ethnographically, for the most part, see the basketry design. You see people starting to use shaped lumber, as in the Arctic kayaks and umiaks and various different boats in the subarctic areas and parts of the Mediterranean and parts of Africa. There's skin boats all over the place. You really start looking, and skin boats are used in an enormous amount of cultures, and probably were used by darn near every culture.
Yeah. Nice. So you mentioned the Surviving the Stone Age, but I went to watch it in preparation for this. It's no longer available.
Yeah,
so I haven't seen it.
I'm probably not supposed to say this, but I think you can still find it on Dailymotion. And or if you want to watch and I'm sorry, Channel 4, but not really sorry. Yeah, if you want to watch the better version, it'd be the one that came out on Arte for Germany and France, where they kept a little bit more of the scientific angle in it, whereas some of that was cut from the Channel 4 version that went out for Britain and America. And I am allowed my opinion on that, and that is my opinion.
It was dumbed down then, essentially.
Well, they aired on the side of let's put in drama rather the dramatic bits. There wasn't any drama. There really wasn't any drama. Everyone in the group got along pretty darn well. Everyone were accomplished outdoors people. Everyone knew what they were doing. If someone was asked to do a thing, they just went and did the thing. It was actually rather lovely. But yeah, so yeah, Arte France and Arte Germany. Potentially you can find them there. And I'm sure they'll have English subtitles. Otherwise, I think it's Dailymotion for the English version.
I'll try and get a hold of it.
All right.
So the other thing I was going to talk to you about, if you don't mind, because I know it was a few years ago now, was your time on Alone.
Yes, of course.
Unless you're sick of people asking about it.
No, it's fine. I mean, it was a fabulous experience. I had a great time. I mean, it was a paid starvation vacation where I got to learn lots of things and find holes in my skill set and pat myself on my back for other parts of my skill set that held up well. And, it was wonderful.
So I watched this with my wife and 7-year-old daughter. I'm not sure what the age limit is now that I say that, but she watched it anyway. She very much enjoyed it.
Excellent.
Although we started watching the season after and she said it was boring. So
oh, really?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So we were kind of coming up with questions together, if you like. So some of these come from my daughter as well.
Oh, sure.
The first and obvious one was, why did you apply to be on Alone?
I didn't apply to be on.
Oh, you didn't?
No. Alone will occasionally reach out to people who they think would be a good fit for the program. Okay. Or who have been suggested by past participants, or that kind of thing. So I was approached and asked if I would then be willing to send in footage and do the application process. So I had a conversation with the casting agent, which is the person who approaches people, asked a few pertinent questions, mainly to do with if I'm not accepted and I go cancelling. I need to know if I'm on or not. Because if I'm self-employed, completely self-employed, if I go and cancel a bunch of work and then you tell me, no, you didn't get in, I can't just
a big problem.
Refill those courses at the drop of a hat. That is not how life works.
Yeah.
So, so I went ahead and I just went out to the woods for 4 days, actually, out to a friend's permission, and did all the application footage, just all in a row. Butchered the deer with stone tools and using only natural materials around, and built a shelter, did the fire, did the trapping thing, laid out all of the various skills that I thought were pertinent for the program, sent away the footage, which was my first experience ever with filming myself. And I honestly hated it. Yeah. And I was like, well, okay, that happened. That was entertaining. Hopefully they can edit that into something useful, because that's what they do with it. They make it into a little reel, like a little sizzle reel, and they then show that to the channel. The channel is then the person who actually makes that the entity that makes that final decision. Yep. But the reason I considered it at all was simply because it was a bit of a challenge, and not like you know what? It's not a challenge. That's not even the word I want to use. It was an opportunity to put all these skills that you teach people all the time and that you've been practicing your whole life into use in a really long-term living situation in which you have safety backup. So if you do anything really extraordinarily stupid, you have a little red button that you can push that says, yep, I fubbed it. Please come safe.
I think actually that ties in, because I had another question further down the list, was about how far away was the rescue. So did you ever feel like you were in genuine danger? I know there's a point when you went swimming.
The safety crew, I believe, is required to be within a half an hour. They need to be able to reach any of the participants within a half an hour.
Okay.
With the swimming incident, I think that potentially rattled more than my nerves. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess they're not aware of what's going on, are they? Unless you press the
No,
button,
it's not
then
live feed. Oh,
clue.
no, absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
They get the footage later. And then probably
and
have a
question
little
what you were doing.
right. Where they throw things at the wall and go, how stupid can you be? But But we have multiple levels of ability to communicate with the safety crew. So number one, you have a GPS unit that's on you at all times that you can send old school text via.
Right. Yeah.
Second level is a sat phone, so which works in most places. And then there's also a walkie-talkie. Haven't the slightest idea how the walkie-talkie works, and I never did use it. And considering the areas we were in, I didn't have much faith in the fact that walkie-talkie would work, so I never bothered. But yeah. So if something
like
does, if there's something that you desperately need to ask, like, hey, I can't identify this duck species, but I could shoot it. Can I describe it to you? Is it legal? That's what it's for. Because there are lots of rules and regulations, and they don't want you breaking any laws. You don't want to break any laws. It is a television program. There needs to be ways of sorting out those sorts of conundrums.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what was the biggest thing that you learned from your time on Alone?
I really need to work on my fishing ability. It's not I can make all the fishing gear.
Yeah.
I can make beautiful fishing gear from time periods spanning from Stone Age to reasonably modern. But I hate fish. I hate eating fish. Fish is disgusting. So actually, what I'm really lacking is the understanding of what to do with my gear. What kind of fish is going to be when? What does it like to eat? What
if you don't like eating it,
yes.
If you don't like eating it, then I guess why would you bother? It's like people think I forage for mushrooms all the time, but I'm not a massive mushroom eater, so I don't bother.
Exactly. That's the thing, and I don't really even live with anyone who likes fish that much. So it's a difficult thing for me to just go out fishing, and it'd be a little bit like your bird hunters that shoot a pheasant and chuck it in the hedge. I'd be catching a fish and go, oh, well, that one's not through the lip, but I'm not sure what to do with it now. Skin it, because I can tan the skin, and then I'll chuck the rest in the bushes. Yep.
Yeah. So you need to learn to love to eat fish first.
I really don't. I just need to find somebody who likes to eat fish, and they can just follow me around while I learn better fishing technique, and they can just eat the fish. I'm sure there'll be a volunteer out there somewhere. Just eat my fish.
I'm going to leave that question till a bit later because I think I should have done that at a later one. This one is directly from my daughter.
All right, excellent. Shoot.
Whilst we were eating dinner today, she specifically asked me to make sure I asked this. So She wants to know what your 10 items were, but there is a follow-on to that
Okay.
is, would you change the items that you chose if you did it again?
She's 7 and she asked that? That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All
She's
right.
given me a list of what she would take.
Okay.
I've told her
Okay.
already that she wouldn't
Tell
be
her she's
allowed.
gonna have to remember this was like 4 years ago now. Let me get my
Yeah.
fingers out here. Yeah. So I took a knife, I took a saw, I took a metal pot, I took a sleeping bag, fishing gear, my bow and arrow, paracord, food ration, la 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 la, two other things. Ah, snare wire and a magical mystery item. Just escaped my brain. If I knew everything I know now about
Yeah.
the area, if I was to redo the thing completely, and I knew
Yeah.
everything I know now about the area, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
bothered bringing snare wire. We simply weren't allowed to trap for basically anything other than grouse
Yeah.
and hare. And it was a low year for hare. I never saw so much as a rabbit turd the entire time I was out there, let alone a rabbit or a hare. And because there was no rabbits, apparently the grouse were the next thing on the food chain. And normally, blue grouse are the kind of bird that you just kind of walk at them diagonally, don't make eye contact. And I've actually hit them with sticks in my younger years living in the US. These did not do that at all. You'd see them, they'd catch sight of you, and then they would fly from 100 yards away, 100 yards further into the trees. I was never in a position to even remotely get a shot at one. Like, I saw them
Yeah.
4 times. So I saw 4 grouse the entire time I was out and no rabbit. So the snare wire was pretty useless. Because of the hunting restrictions, honestly, the bow and arrow was pretty useless as well. But I still would take it with me because I really like archery and it gave me something to do. So I'd
I'm
walk around and
presuming
stump.
I presume then you don't have any background knowledge as to where you're going before you go.
You have some,
Yeah.
not a lot. No, you get it. It's a very limited, and then they try and negotiate.
Yeah.
The production crew tries to negotiate some rules. We happen to just be in an area with 4 overlapping sets of restrictions. So it was the Canadian federal restrictions, provincial restrictions. We were in a state park, so there were state park restrictions, and then we were also on tribal land. So there were a few things that were asked by the tribe that we do or not do. So yeah.
Yeah.
And we had to play the game by that set of rules. And anybody who doesn't think it's a game, something I got a lot of crap about online for calling it a game, but there's prize money involved, there's competitors, and there are rules. So I'm not really quite sure how it's not a game. It's a very
100%.
realistic game, and it shouldn't take away from anyone's experience of what they experience whilst they're out there or what they are viewing. Because it's a game doesn't make it not real. It's very real. It's just not. It's not a realistic representation of what one would do if they were dumped in that place and they were actually in a real, true survival situation, i.e., they were there unintentionally. Their goal was to get out as soon as possible. There would be it's a completely different goal set and a completely different set of things one would do. So, yeah. Yeah.
So
I thought of it as a big jigsaw puzzle where I was missing a good portion of the pieces, but you still had to put the puzzle back together to make a picture that you could recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I will give you Ocean's list.
All right, yes, please.
I'm fairly certain she's not allowed most of these.
That's great. I want to know what she'd take anyway.
And I did say to her, I'm sure you can't take these things, but okay. So 2 cows, 1 male and 1 female, so they can have babies.
Good plan. Future planning.
A horse. A pig.
Pick?
some salt,
That's not a bad
fish,
idea.
a fishing rod, a sleeping bag, an axe, a saw, and a knife. So they get a bit more allowable as you go along, I think.
Absolutely. About half of those are good to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even the salt, you can take a block of salt now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of our
Yeah.
items that it's an option.
Yeah. She also questioned whether we can work out a way that there can be a kids version so that she can do it. She
Personally, I think that would
suggests
be bloody awesome. I struggle to imagine the insurance company that would touch that with a 10-foot pole, but that would be pretty cool.
this was our dinner discussion today before we recorded. And
Fantastic. You
so she
tell her I'd
said
watch. If she ends up on a kid's version, I'd be all about it. I'd watch
she thinks the age range should be 7 and up for some reason. Up to the age of 12.
Okay.
And then the plans changed slightly for a bit because then she was talking about what you'd be allowed, and it ended up being, well, maybe we could just be alone in a hotel and have our parents' wallets to go shopping.
All right. Now my
Yes.
question is, what would she back to her? She has to come up with 10 things she'd buy with your wallet.
Mm. Don't want to know, I don't think. Oh, yes. So I said I'd ask. So that's that one. um, yeah, what was it like returning to civilization after such an intense experience? Did you have like an adjustment period? I'm assuming you can't just be plunked back into society again and
No,
left to.
no, I
Yeah.
think they kind of did that for the first couple of seasons, and then they learned their lesson that that is not the ideal way to reintroduce people to the modern
Yeah.
world. You're placed into a recovery program, so
Mm.
you're given a refeeding program where they bring food at a specific time each day. You have health checks. You are allowed 2 phone calls on the first day you're back.
Sounds like prison.
Yes, a little bit. And you're not allowed out without supervision. And honestly, I don't think that really has much to do with them. I think it has to do with the rules of their insurance. Once you're back in the lodge, as it were, you're
Yeah.
now in their care in a way that you're not when you're in the field. But yeah, it does feel pretty bizarre to go from I can do whatever the heck I want
Yeah.
for at any given time of day with whatever tools I have to hand, as crazy as I might want it to be, to I'm not allowed out of my hotel room without supervision. So that part of the readjustment was actually the thing that got me. I have done the whole I've been out in the woods for long periods of time, and then I drop myself right back into an airport. After surviving the Stone Age, yeah, we were 4 weeks out. And then we were in a hotel for one night and then an airport the next day. So some people find that kind of reintroduction rather jarring. And I think that the Alone production crew actually has a pretty decent handle on the slow reintroduction. Yeah, I think it's a good plan, and the refeeding thing is very good because there are some contestants that end up, or participants. I don't really like the word contestants, participants in the program, because by the time you're out there, you're not competing with anybody else. You're only competing with yourself. You kind of forget everyone else exists for the most part at some point. There have been participants in the past that have spent very long periods of time without eating anything, at which point your intestines actually shut down. You have to restart the entire gastrointestinal tract.
The guy that won the season after you did that, didn't he? He starved himself for.
Yes,
I don't know,
he had a game plan. He looked at the game, he figured out the rules, and then he laid out his plan, and his plan worked.
It did.
I think he's gotten a little bit of hell for the way he went about it, but it's a game. He played it, he won.
Yeah.
Yep. Maybe he didn't do it in the world's most entertaining television way, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily.
He was there to win.
Yeah, that's not necessarily maybe what he cared about. Maybe he cared about the fact that now I have this amount of money that means that I can set up this thing in my real life that isn't TV.
Yeah.
That means that myself and my partner or his family or whatever it is that he happens to have going on can do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Going forward. That's fantastic. And more power to you.
So when you're being fed and everything you said it was a hotel?
It was in our case, it was like a lodge. It was like a long ranch style lodge. So there was little rooms along a balcony. Yep. Along the front to the lake.
Are you in contact with the other participants at that point?
No.
You're still isolated from them. So have you ever met anyone that was on your series?
Well, yes, beforehand we knew each other very well because we were the series during COVID. So we all ended up isolating together for 14 days in Canada before we even got to the induction camp, which is normally 10 days where they give you a crash course in filming yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, here's some cameras. This is how you turn them on. This is where you point them. If the red thing's not flashing, it's not recording. That's basically what I took away from it. If you want to talk down to people, you put the camera down here. If you want people to think they are above you, you put the camera up here. If you want to talk to them like friends, you stick the camera here. That's pretty much everything I remember.
That was actually something I wondered because there's obviously a look to the way it's all edited together. And I figured there must be some kind of training program.
We do. We get a little bit of a crash course, but I cannot imagine the editing job that must comprise that program.
Yeah.
I mean, on Surviving the Stone Age, I filmed a bush while we shot a red deer. So my filming skills are not exactly spot on. I know I did a lot of filming weird angles of projects that whilst I was doing on alone, that they would give you feedback too. They'd be like, can you talk to the camera more? Can you point the camera at what you're doing rather than when you looked at it, you were like, cool, you can see my face. Your face isn't what's doing the things, it's your hands. Can you get that thing to work? Yeah. You did get feedback over the course of, because they come and they collect the SD cards every 2 weeks. You got a med check and they come and pick up SD cards, give you new batteries. If you needed new batteries or more SD cards in between those 2 times, then you'd do a dead. So you just stuff them all in a dry sack and ditch them on the beach. And you'd go do your thing. They'd swing by, pick them up, drop off fresh replacements in their place. You'd come back and you had a black dry sack baby on the beach full of batteries. Yeehaw. It would go in the pelly case, and that's that. Which I really kind of preferred, because if they have to come out and actually like contact you, they always do it on a nice day where the weather is nice. And you're like, I don't want to be in camp. I have things to do.
So did it change your perspective on life in any way, being on the show?
No.
Nope.
Not really. No. It was not my first rodeo doing this kind of thing. It more cemented my view on life. And that's just that we are meant to spend a given period of time outside. No one's meant to live in a box. Boxes are comfortable and it's a nice place to sleep. We've been sleeping in boxes for probably a couple million years at this point. We like our boxes to sleep in. But the rest of the day, we as a species have evolved to enjoy the feedback that we get visually, auditorily, and haptically from the world around us. And we don't necessarily get that from our little metal boxes that are our computers and our TVs and everything else. We get the intellectual stimulation of conversations across the world, of massive amounts of information input, but it's at the expense of a number of the other sensory inputs that perhaps our mental health would benefit from more of.
I did wonder whether you'd go down the route about people need other people from a social perspective.
Oops. No, I'm the one that I
No.
didn't really miss anyone, and I was having a great time on my own. And at some point I was walking in the lake playing with a fish trap, and I thought I should probably mention someone from home because otherwise everyone's going to think I'm a sociopath. So I was just like, gosh, I wonder what my mom and dad are doing right now. And I honestly think that was in the day 60s, which is a little bit ridiculous.
I think I don't know if it's like the way it's edited and stuff. To me, it seemed more that it was the men that had difficulty missing family members.
I I think women don't often get the same kind of break from reality that men sometimes do more often get.
Yeah,
So they really appreciate and know how rare the opportunity is to be able to do what you want to do, when you
yeah.
want to do it, how you want to do it, without any interference for a given period of time. It's not forever.
Mm.
You will, unless you do something really stupid, you will see all those people again. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It'd be pretty extreme if you didn't, I guess.
yes, absolutely. But
Which,
people, I mean, for the most part, people do need other people. I wouldn't want to live all by
yeah,
myself in the woods forever.
yeah.
I'd want to come out every couple of months and say hi to someone. So, yeah,
No, that's fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah. There was a
and
lady I spoke to in the Netherlands last year. There's a site called Prehistoric Dorp,
yes,
Eindhoven. And the lady there was living in the 14th century, I think it was, in the 14th
yeah,
century house for a couple of months. And one of the things that she was taking, I chatted to her sort of midway, I think about a month in, and she was saying that one of the biggest things that she found is that you need other people, because
yes,
that house would have existed around a village with, you know, a bakery
yes.
and a blacksmith and all these other things. Whereas because she was on her own, she was trying to pick things from the garden, preserve them, cook her daily meal, and it just became a massive chore.
Absolutely. No, that
Yeah,
aspect is, I completely get behind that. I mean,
yeah,
living in the situation that I was, I have a small shelter. My only person I need to feed is myself. I have tools that are already made that I've brought with me. Unless
yeah.
I damage them in some way, I don't have to do anything like that. There was no
Mm,
nappable stone there. You could have made ground stone tools, but there was nothing really nappable, as in for flint napping.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
but compared to the situation like with surviving the Stone Age, where we had 8 people, we were working as a group.
Mm,
That was a very different concept. We had to bring in enough food for 8 people. And in order to do that, you need to have a section of camp going out and they're foraging or they're hunting or they would have been trapping if we'd been allowed to trap, but they changed the rules in Bulgaria the week before we left for the program, which was part of the reason the program was supposed to be held there in the first place. But that's okay. So that's why there's no trapping in the program. Um, just in case
oh,
anyone was wondering. But
rules.
then the other, there was another contingent that was back at camp working on shelters
Yeah,
or houses or working at the cooking or making tools or
yeah.
making containers or maintaining equipment. Maintaining equipment is one of those things that people don't often think about because most people have metal everything, right? You got your
Mm,
titanium cup, you got your metal knife, you've got your backpack that's made out of whatever super tough fabric, yada, yada, yada. Right. You're constantly with Stone Age sort of technology, you're constantly repairing things. My stitch breaks here. This strap has gotten stretched out of shape, so it's not the right weight to this strap. That needs
yeah.
sorting. The straps on your shoes have gotten stretched or snapped, or the shoe itself is broken. The pot has a chip. Oh, my bark container leaks now. It's constant. There's constant maintenance of the things that you have with you. And it does take up a given amount of time in any
Yeah.
given day to do it or to remake it. Because sometimes they are just broken beyond repair and they become firewood.
Yeah. We've been talking for quite some time. Um, I've gone through most of the questions for the alone stuff. But I do have some questions I ask every guest. If you've still got time to run through those.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
Yeah. Um, so if you had an unlimited budget, what would be your dream project?
Oh, if I had an unlimited budget, my dream project would be the project I'm still currently working on right now, which is putting together a Center for Ancient Technologies. But if I had an unlimited budget, oh man, I'm currently going to be moving to Sweden and putting it in Sweden because I really like the land use laws there and the allman's law, so the ability to forage, the right to roam.
Yeah.
If I had an unlimited budget, I might cite it in a different country simply because of the different resource sets. Or maybe if I had an unlimited budget, I could make one in a couple of different countries, in which case I could have lots of different resource sets. But that would be my goal. And one of them would have a real lab, like an actual proper scientific lab, where I could have all of the equipment that I need to do all of the various leather testing that I've had in my head for 20 years that I would love to do, and just really nail down some of the processes by which some of the prehistoric technologies work, and answer some of the smoke versus oil versus emulsified oils questions. That's what I'd do, so that I could get people from all over the world. Oh, and if I had an unlimited budget, I wouldn't charge for courses. People could just come. Need to pay their airfare and get there.
That's nice. Yeah, nice touch. Yeah.
In unlimited budget, why do you need people to pay?
Okay, so the next question I think is going to be fairly obvious to anyone that has heard you before or listened to this point. Do you think you could survive on a Viking Age diet?
On the Viking Age diet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that would be.
Being as you've gone further back and you've done all the alone stuff, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I would have any problem with a Viking Age diet. No, except for all that fish.
The follow-on question from that was, is there anything you'd miss on a Viking Age diet?
Vikings have cheese, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm good.
Just cheese.
Just cheese.
Yeah.
Oh, orange juice.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had that.
Yeah, I have a little bit of almost a fetish for orange juice. I really, really like orange juice. It's one of the things I really missed on Alone. I'd wake up and be like, ooh, orange juice. Nope, I've got chopped up roots. Nice.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone refer to a drink as a fetish.
Well, first time for everything.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. Next one might be an interesting one, I think. So what's the weirdest thing in your kitchen?
I have a device that was made by a gentleman in the United States that is called a brain blaster. His name is George Michaud. He's someone who tans lots and lots of skins and has for a very, very long time. And it's a cool little device that you can attach to your garden hose. You stick it in the back of the foramen magnum of a skull, put it over a bucket that has a sieve in it, and turn the water on. And it splits the brain in half, pops it back out the foramen magnum, drops into the sieve, and you have nice two clean halves of a brain. And you didn't have to chop the head open and go digging with a spoon.
That's a very specific tool.
It is.
Wow.
It's really cool. I'm telling you, he should patent it, but there it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a fairly limited market, I would imagine.
I think it's a pretty niche market, yeah.
Okay, what's the worst food you've ever eaten?
Oh, worst food. Honestly, yeah, that one time that someone told me I would like sardines. Oh no, actually, okay, sardines was bad.
Yeah.
The rotten shark from Iceland, that trumped that.
Oh, the hakal.
Yep.
Yeah. In its defense, it's not rotten, it's fermented.
Fermented. Yeah.
People say it's rotten. It's
It's
not the worst.
it was more that I wasn't expecting it. I was sat around a table in Viken in Sweden in a Viking village, and we'd all had a few meads and beers, most likely. And there was a little bowl of what I thought were Turkish delights being passed around the table. So I popped one in my mouth, continued chatting, and then at some point, my mouth communicated to my brain that what my eyes thought was in the bowl was not what was in my mouth. And at this point, kind of half the table had gone quiet, and they just had that look on their face like, she ate the thing. Let's watch. Let's watch the silly person. Yes. I did just, absolutely do the, all right, we've gotten this far, you've just got to swallow. I mean, there's no other option, is there? Get it down, yeah. And then mead, anything close. But yeah, I really dislike fish, but oily fish are even worse. So sardines, mackerel, any of those are just disgusting.
Surströmming is the worst if you want fish. Yeah.
I don't understand how everyone gets it past their nose and into their mouth. Horrible. I mean, if it smells like that, you are not made to put it in your mouth.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't get past. The furthest I got was a little nibble of a small piece. Horrible stuff.
No, they had it in Lyra one year in Denmark. Some of the Swedes brought it across more as a joke, and they drained it off in the bushes far away from camp, so that otherwise you'd run everyone out of camp. But everyone who even ate it, if they came into the research tent, you could smell it on them, and I was like, out, get out. You can come back tomorrow. I'm not sure how you managed to eat it, but I can tell you did.
My friend is known as Terry the Science Viking. And he, on this podcast, ate a whole fish from the tin like a seal. And he says it's not the worst thing he's ever eaten.
Well, that begs a question, doesn't it?
Well, the worst thing he's ever eaten is cardamom.
Cardamom?
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
Most people consider that a nice taste.
Yep.
Okay.
Apparently, surströmming is better
than cardamom.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Anyway. Yep.
Fair enough.
So we've got 2 questions left.
All right.
The next one is, what's the most memorable meal you've ever had?
The first time I got to have potato olays from a fast food Mexican restaurant that developed in Wyoming. So that'll tell you how authentic that is. After I got back from Malone with nacho cheese, which is also not cheese. That. Simply because it was deep fried carbohydrates with cheese. Oh, that was so good. And that's what I craved on Alone was fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not have enough fat. I was just, so your brain just went to anything deep fried. If there was carbohydrates involved with it, great. But if it was deep fried fat, that was also good. That was fine. I mean, I even thought about muck tuck at one point, which is whale blubber. Ooh. I've only had it one time in my whole life. And when it's hot, it's good. When it's cold, it's a little bit like rubbing very solid bacon grease all over your teeth.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's not, the texture is suboptimal, right? Yes. But when it's hot, it was nice. But yeah, my brain even went to that on some days.
That's a weird thing to crave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, I lost a lot of weight. When I came out, I was 41 kilos. I was very, very thin. Still having a great time. Yeah. And the day before they pulled me, I was like 40 feet up a Douglas fir pulling out firewood because there was so much snow I couldn't find any other firewood. But, is what it is. Those doctors have to make their calls based on what they see that day, and their medical license is on the line. So I would never, everyone's like, are you angry at the doctor? Absolutely not. No.
Yeah. I think like you said before, it's a game, isn't it? So you know the rules when you go in.
Yeah, you know the rules. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And you know what they saw that day, decided they were like, okay, I'm uncomfortable with you staying any longer. And that's just that. You know, game's over.
Mm.
When you get on the boat. And then somewhere on the way back to the lodge, the doctor goes, how was that bone broth? And I was like, what bone broth? Oh, you didn't get the bone broth? I was like, no, was there bone broth? So then I got my little thermos of bone broth. And that
Oh,
was
so they
very
do
nice.
bring you food?
Yeah, they brought you a little container of bone broth. Yeah.
Oh,
They
right.
must just have it on the boat, just thinking
Yeah.
in case.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can you
it's
imagine if
69
someone's been
days in.
starved? Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, if you've been starving for that long or,
Yeah.
eating minimal food, then yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Where I was eating a
that makes
lot of
sense.
food. That wasn't the problem. The caloric intake wasn't high enough. I had to eat about 4 meals a day in order to get in the amount of bulk to bring my calories up above, say, at the very end, it was about 1,100 a day.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I'd been getting 16, 1,700. But from about day 50 onward, yeah, I was down in the 1,000 to 1,100 a day mark, and struggling to be able to get far enough afield to bring any more in. Yeah.
How did you know how many calories you were taking? That seems quite specific.
Oh, because I memorized the caloric contents of most of the plants before I went out, and then I devised a weighing system so that I knew how many grams I was eating each day.
Wow. Do many people do that, or do they just eat what they can?
I don't think many people do that, according to the survival consultant. No, I was potentially the first that has gone that route. Can't take the scientist out of the practical, apparently.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
I weighed my Michelle, actually, and I both weighed our GoPros before we went out into the field. So we had a set measure. We knew how much the GoPro weighed. So then it's just a matter of a straight stick and 2
Yeah.
bags that I stitched out of my t-shirt that were the same size. And then you could figure out what 300 grams, your GoPro is 300 grams, and that bag was 300 grams of that kind of berry. That kind of berry, it was 90 calories per gram, or per 100 grams,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, per 100 grams. So you knew that was then that set amount of calories. And I had my little tin can. I would pour them into the tin can. I would make a mark on the side for that type of food. So I didn't have to weigh it again. I just fill it to there and know that that was approximately where I needed to be.
That's very cunning. Yeah.
Yeah, it meant that I had a fair idea of how many calories I was putting in, and then I could mitigate my activity level. If I wasn't getting enough that day, I'd keep my activity minimal. If I had more calories that day, then I could maybe go out and do some things that otherwise I would have been spending more calories than I was bringing in. Because that's really the name of the game, is calories in to calories out.
Yes. Actually, I have one more question on alone before we do the actual last question.
Sure. Okay, go for it.
And this is based on, I don't know whether um you know really, but a lot of contestants, if they kill an animal, they tend to focus quite a lot on almost rationing, preserving, so they've got that meat for a later date. Why does no one just think, sod it, I've got the meat here now, I'm going to take in, I need the calories, I'll take it all in now, or a lot of it in now, and I'll worry about the next meal the next time?
It depends on the size of the animal. You could do that with something, say a rabbit, and
Yeah.
that might be intelligent, like that might be physiologically doable. When it comes to something the size of a deer, you just
You're not
eat
going to
that
eat a whole
much.
deer.
Your body's been in a situation where it's going to try and pull as much nutrition out of everything you give it as it can. You overload it with bulk or something like meat, it's gonna stop doing that thing, and you are going to excrete more of the nutritional content of that food than you otherwise would if you brought yourself back up onto a normal ration slowly. And in order to do that, you then need to preserve things.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways to preserve things out there that are not just jerking the meat. Again, on the Using the Whole Animal course, we go through the whole process of what parts of an animal rot the fastest and how do we take something apart in the field with no refrigeration and no salt and no means for anything other than fire, sun, wind, and you. And how do we make the best use of all of those parts and get the most caloric value out of them? We don't go so far as to smashing bones for bone grease, which is an archaeological and ethnographic technique for pulling the last little bits of lipid content or organic content out of bone, as bone is a two-part component of mineral and organic. The organic is bioavailable. The mineral is semi-bioavailable, but is a building block, not a caloric thing. Yeah. So I think that's potentially why, if people get big game, why they don't just pull a lion, eat a lot, and then sleep, which we totally did do on Surviving the Stone Age because it was a different situation.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely bored the film crew that day after we got the deer because, we cooked a leg in a pit overnight and then we ate a lot. And then we just laid in the sun and did
Sounds nice.
Nothing.
I like that plan.
Yeah, it was good. It was a great day.
Yeah. All right. So there is one last question.
All right.
And then I'll let you get on with your evening. So when you die, your relatives are preparing your grave goods. What food and drink do you get to take to the feast in Valhalla?
Oh. A grilled cheese sandwich and Old Rosie, which is a cider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old Rosie. Nice.
Favorite food is probably grilled cheese sandwich or cheese toasties. I think they are over here, dipped in ketchup, because I'm apparently 10.
I did not expect that answer. Awesome.
I am not much of a cook. Yep. If I had to eat 3 meals for the rest of my life, it would basically be grilled cheese sandwiches, ramen noodles, and I'd have somebody else make me crab that you can dunk in butter.
Nice.
Fantastic.
You can take that stuff if you like as well. There's no limit.
I can take all of that. All right.
Yeah,
cool.
Sure.
All right. I get spicy ramen noodles then with avocado and labanat, which is a soft cheese from the Middle East. Makes a really good soup. And then, I get snow crab dipped in clarified butter.
I made that sound like I'm on the gate, didn't I? Then like you can, bring it in.
All right.
It's fine. Hey. Yeah, we'll have that. No, we're not taking your surströmming. Come on.
Excellent. But if I'm going to Valhalla, then somebody else has to take the crab meat out of the legs. Because in the US, we get it served in the shell.
Yeah.
Which is the best way to never get fat. It takes forever to get the meat out.
Maybe you just take the meat and not the shell somehow. I don't know.
Somehow. That would work. I mean, it's magic, right? We can just go with magic.
Yeah.
Magic crab.
Absolutely. I don't know whether you want to give yourself a social media plug, your website for your courses, anything like that.
I'd actually love to, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So again, my name is Dr. Theresa Emerich Kamper. I'm a specialist in prehistoric animal skin tanning technologies and animal processing. I teach a load of courses all over the world. So if you're interested in seeing where those courses might be and if they happen to be near you, then please check out theresaemerich.com /courses. And on Instagram, I am traditional_leather. Facebook, I think I'm just Theresa Emerich. Lovely to be on the podcast, and thank you so much for having me.
It was great to have you. Stay on the line. I'll talk to you a bit more just briefly before you go. But
absolutely.
Thank you everyone for listening or watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more, remember to like and subscribe and give the show a rating. You can also help keep the show going by becoming a Patreon, where you'll get early access to all episodes. Or check out my range of merch on my store. Links are in the episode description. Thanks for watching.